Welcome back to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast, the place where poetry meets conversation. I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and before we get into today's topic, make sure you hit that plus sign so you don't miss an episode. Also, please subscribe to my blog, thebrownssugarcafe.blog, and if you find any value in this episode or any other episodes, make sure you leave a heartfelt review. So with that being said, let's get to it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. I hope that you all are doing well. I hope that you all are enjoying the guests that I have so far. And I hope that you all enjoy these solo episodes. I started this podcast doing solo episodes, and then season 2, I started adding guests. So I wanted to, this season, continue having more solo episodes. You know, maybe some of you just want to hear from me. Sometimes it's good to hear from the host, and sometimes it's good to bring people in so you can hear another voice. But I wasn't even going to release an episode this week, to be honest, because I'm a little behind with my episodes. And so I need to get those edited and sorted out. I'm also behind on my newsletter. The newsletter was supposed to be out on Monday. I made a commitment to publish a new article in my newsletter once every month. And I chose the first Monday of the beginning of the month as my day. But I also made a promise to allow myself some grace, that if something comes up, I don't pressure myself to make sure it's out there. And so my newsletter, if you're listening to this at the time this podcast is released, my newsletter, if you're signed up, the newsletter will be in your inbox tomorrow morning. That's Friday morning, so don't worry about that. The newsletter is pretty much written, but I just have to go through it. My writer friends know how it is when you go through these drafts and you want to make sure that you're saying everything you need to say and that everything is concise and flowing well. So be on the lookout for that. And another thing about this week is my wife asked me if I was going to have a podcast episode this week, and I casually said no. And guess what? There wasn't a podcast episode today. But then my good friend Antonio Landis Thompson reached out to me, and he asked where my podcast episode was, because he noticed that I dropped them on Thursdays. So here I am thinking that, hey, if I don't post one this week, nobody's going to notice. Who's really going to pay attention? And this morning, because I normally post them at midnight, and this morning I got a text from him asking where the podcast episode was. So here I am. Here's the episode. It just made me think about how sometimes we have plans and we want things to go a certain way, because I'm a very structured person. I don't plan everything, but when I do have a plan for stuff, I like it to go in a certain order, and I like for it to go a certain way. Now, I'm not one of those people who don't think that things come up. I'm really an advocate of, reminding ourselves that things do happen and things don't always go the way that we planned. But I figured, hey, I'm a little behind, so I'll just, publish the episode next week. But apparently that wasn't the plan for this week. The plan was for me to record this episode as I'm recording it now, and letting you know that it's okay to sometimes do things outside of your schedule, do things not the way they're planned, and it's okay to pivot. A lot of times in life we have to pivot, and we have to do things that we don't want to do, don't feel like doing. And a lot of us as men especially understand what that is, to just do what you need to do and make sure that everybody's okay. And we don't often allow ourselves enough room for grace, or enough room to admit that we're tired, enough room to admit that, hey, we just don't feel like it. And that's okay. But always know that, you always have people that are counting on you, people that see you, and people that you inspire. Antonio has a podcast also. And his podcast is the Winners for Life Coaching Podcast. So please check that out. He's on all podcasting platforms as well. But I didn't know that how I was releasing my podcast episodes was an inspiration to him. It wasn't until he told me that in his message. So one can argue that maybe I didn't have the episode planned for this week because he needed to be able to share that with me, because I needed to hear it. So sometimes things happen out of our control, and it's intentional. And sometimes we have to pivot. Sometimes we have to change direction. That doesn't mean the goal changes, because if you're playing basketball and you're pivoting with the ball, the goal is still trying to score points. The goal is still to win the game. So don't always look at pivoting as if you have to actually change altogether. Changing direction doesn't mean that your goals change. Sometimes we find different ways to accomplish goals. And then even with pivoting, we have to realize and remember that you can always pass the ball and get it passed back to you. Now, if you're playing basketball and you've already dribbled and you start pivoting, you can't move that pivot foot. Now, I know if you watch the NBA, it looks like you could move your pivot foot, you can travel, all that other stuff. But if you've already picked up your dribble and you're pivoting, you can't change that pivot foot until you pass the ball. And when you get the ball back, not only do you have the free range to pivot with another foot, you have free range to take the ball down the court and score a basket. So think about it like that. Don't be so stuck on your schedule. Now, don't be so relaxed and, where you just don't care. But if you're structured, you have a system, you have a schedule, and if it gets thrown off, don't worry about it. But I will say, maybe if you have something like a podcast or a newsletter, and this part is for me, if you're planning on not doing it when you specifically said you're going to do it, you should at least let the people know. I honestly didn't think that it would matter, and I see otherwise, and I should know better. But sometimes we forget things, so it's okay. It is quite okay if we forget things, and that's what these type of conversations are about. They help us get on track. Sometimes we do things, and a lot of times it's unintentional, but we don't think that people are noticing. We don't think that it's a big deal, but it is a big deal. And I say this a lot of times when I'm talking to people. It doesn't matter if one person reads your book, if one person reads your post, if one person listens to your podcast. That person is who it was intended for. And the effect that you have on that person trickles down to the people they come in contact with. So somebody is always rooting for you. It's funny because I was going to do a Facebook post the other day and say that if you're, and I'll still put it up there. I was going to say that if you're reading this post, know that I'm rooting for you, even if nobody else is. I want people to do their best. I want people to be the best versions of themselves. I want to see people excel. I'm a big supporter of people. If you have something going on, even if I can't attend, I'm going to share it with people on my social media, people that I know, word of mouth. That's just who I am, because I want to see everybody win. I want to see everybody do the best. So just know that people are rooting for you. Sometimes I think that I don't remember that enough. I know that my wife supports me, obviously, and I know that my immediate family supports me, and even, my family in general. I know that they support me because that's just who we are. We support each other. But when it comes to friends and people, old co-workers, I posted a poem yesterday, and shout out to my wife for giving me the idea for the poem. I was trying to figure out where I was going to go with my poem. So I just asked her just give me a word so I could have a prompt, something to springboard me into writing a poem. And then that led to me writing a poem. And the title of this poem is Hold On to Hope. And it says, wake up, put on your cape, and be great. Be, function, compartmentalize. Pray, give thanks, and hold on to hope. Take a deep breath in, pause, then exhale. Let go of fear and hold on to hope. Simple poem, something to encourage you, something to get you through the day, something to inspire you. And then I get a message today saying that this poem is what was needed. Every time I have like a slight, and it's not a large thought like it used to be, but whenever there's a slight thought where I'm thinking, where I want to kind of trick myself into, maybe I can stop doing the blog every Wednesday. But every time it's like a little small thought, I always get a message about how the poem I wrote that day was needed. Because I'm sitting here like, I wonder if people are still opening their email and reading these poems. I get feedback from whenever I post it on Facebook and I share it there and people read it, but I'm often wondering if people are still opening their email, because I don't check that type of stuff. It's a way I can check, but I don't. And to know that people are still opening their emails, hearing back feedback from people about how a particular poem was needed for that day. So with that being said, I don't know why I just assumed that nobody would notice that there wasn't a podcast episode today. But here you have it, folks. Here's the podcast episode for the day. Shout out to Antonio Landis Thompson for reminding me that I needed to show up. Shout out to him and his platform. You all, please make sure you check him out. Like I said, this brother's podcast is called Winners for Life Coaching Podcast. He's on all platforms. He's even on YouTube. So check him out. Real good brother. I've had him on the show before. It's about time to get him back on the show, but I had him on the show, I believe it was last season. So check out that episode if you missed it, and check out all the episodes this season and previous seasons. So that's all. I just wanted to come on here and let you guys know that season 5 is still going. We haven't reached the finale yet. We have a few more episodes to go, so be on the lookout for those. And as always, remember, keep pushing forward. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and this is the place where poetry meets conversation. Hit that follow button and turn on your notifications so you won't miss an episode. Check out my blog, thebrownsugarcafe.blog. Also connect with me on Instagram at thebrownsugarcafe. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, remember, keep pushing forward.